I'm of a generation who grew up in a world where we didn't have social media. I suppose writing people letters and postcards and ringing them up on the actual dial telephone was the way in which we communicated. Yeah, okay, I'm an old person. However, the world has changed, and there are so many different social media platforms out there, whether or not it is, Facebook is your place to go, or Snapchat, or YouTube, or Pinterest, or LinkedIn, or WeChat, or, I don't know, I'm more of a YouTube man myself. Check out the YouTube videos on rhema.co.nz. Somebody who's got his head around all of these social media apps, and some you probably haven't heard of, Head of Digital at Rhema Media, Justin Smith, joins me in the studio once again. Justin, kia ora.
That's a mighty Andrew. How are we doing?
Doing very well indeed. Now, I start off describing myself as this grumpy old Luddite, but actually, even from your perspective as a digital native, you must be in the space we're saying, just a minute. There's these new social media platforms out there that I haven't heard of, that my kids are all over. Things are moving pretty fast, right?
Yeah, they are. And the expansion of niche communities online is unreal. But I really like the point that you made of I'm a YouTube person, which is fascinating because people don't actually consider YouTube necessarily a social networking platform in the same conversation.
It's an anti-social network. Yeah, I don't know. But it is, I suppose, it is a community. It's a way of communicating ideas and giving feedback and ranting in the comments. In some ways, it's very much a social media platform, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people think of YouTube as being the content consumption platform for video, and they're not wrong. However, with the advent of access to tools to make content with mobile phones, so many people were able to build communities around the content they created, and therein is the social media aspect of YouTube especially. And so the comments on some of these communities are just their own ecosystems with their own languages and memes, all built around either a single creator or a channel, or it's absolutely a social media network.
Now, I suppose when we say the social network, everyone thinks of Facebook. That's sort of where it all started. Yes. And I mean, hey, it's a big part of the Rhema Media online community, the various Facebook pages. I heard a comment though that actually there's a certain demographic for Facebook now. Tends to be older people, tends to be a certain demographic on Facebook. That'd be accurate?
It is, and that's often the description that people give of Facebook. It's boomer book. It's where your nans and grands are hanging out, and that is true. But that's a bit dismissive and completely blind to the fact of actually all the remaining demographics, of which there is still huge usership, and there's a reason why it's still the biggest social media platform online. Yeah. Part and parcel because it's coming up on 20 years now, having been launched in 2004 back in Harvard, I think was the university. Yeah. So it's been around the longest and is still the largest. But I think a huge amount of what it actually is consistently has changed over the years, and now is in a really fascinating space with all these communities centered a lot around video content, which is a trend across a lot of social media platforms, but in particular Facebook groups and the communities that exist in these niche groups that are talking about whatever topic. Facebook right now is in a huge state of Facebook groups. In
some ways responding to some of the other challenges, some of the things that other social media networks have offered that Facebook perhaps wasn't as sharp on. They've needed to go out there and compete with some of the new arrivals perhaps?
Yeah, and they've done that through acquisition, like we saw with Instagram when they purchased that for $1 billion and some stocks and shares at the time, which was groundbreaking, and has since gone on to be a massive success. WhatsApp, another example. But Facebook itself as a platform has just experimented with so many different facets of, let's try this thing that's happening on this platform over here, steal from there, and is a bit of a muddle at the moment, but has always been that way. I understand it and have experienced it.
Wanting to pick on WhatsApp, actually, because I had an interesting conversation the other day from somebody who was saying they were traveling internationally, and somebody says, I'll message you on WhatsApp. And they says, I'll have to download it. I don't have it. And the response was, well, why do you even have a phone then? There's parts of the world where actually they've kind of leapfrogged the need for telcos and everything's happening on WhatsApp. Is that more of a regional or a cultural thing?
Yeah, both of those things, and you're exactly right. I mean, if you travel overseas where they don't have the first world luxury and privilege that we have of telcos that communicate with each other reasonably well, then you are put in a position where if I'm with one provider, perhaps I'm not able to communicate with my friend who's on another provider.
Yeah.
So the advent of apps like WhatsApp, which bridged the gap, moved it into the internet domain where anyone communicate with anyone, especially internationally, was massive. And so, I mean, in New Zealand, the prevalence of the likes of WhatsApp is generally centered around sports groups, and any other parents out there can attest to the WhatsApp group chats that you're forced to download the app for.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like,
exactly.
oh man, this is punishing.
We've got another app on my phone.
Honestly.
Exactly.
But it's important.
And I suppose that's the idea with WhatsApp, is saying, okay, here's one app to rule them all. This is the only one you need, except it's not.
No.
Because there's different niches, there's different communities.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves in a space where, hey, look, if we've got different social circles, maybe we've got a different app for each one of those.
Yeah, totally. And so, I mean, a great example of that is Facebook Messenger. And especially in New Zealand, so, well, am I messaging on Facebook Messenger or are we doing it in WhatsApp? And the answer is actually, well, both. And there's, diversified, communication happening across all those platforms. I mentioned to you the other day, I might in 24 hours message my wife just via regular old SMS. I might send her a Facebook message, and I'm sending her a WhatsApp too, which includes our son who's over there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm also communicating with my son, not just via WhatsApp, but he's also on Discord, so I'm over there as well. The diversity of, and that's just messaging, let alone social media and activity of, that we're having online.
It would be much easier, of course, if we could send out one message and it would go out on all the platforms, but this is a competitive market, of course. You mentioned Discord.
Yeah.
This is the new one even for you, I understand. This is what the gamers are into?
Well, yeah, I mean, with all of these platforms, I've been across it since the advent of each of them.
Yeah.
But no, I am very much, 2 feet in recently with my son jumping on there. And it is very much stemmed from the gaming community.
Yeah.
But I'm using it, like I say, to communicate with my son, as well as join servers, is what they're called, these communities online. For me, it's around football and some of these other niche interests that I have. Brands that I follow, surfing brands, what do they have any business being in a Discord? Well, actually, it's this fantastic way for me to communicate with the brand at a personal level and have intimate relationship and community.
Yeah, hey, one of the apps that I use mostly to communicate with one of my sons he's disavowed some of the other apps. Signal is the way in which we communicate. That's a good one to do it. And it can be sort of the dark side of it. It's for people that are wanting to not engage with other aspects of social media.
Yeah.
Of course, Telegram channel would be the other dark side of that social media space, pushing back against some of the big companies that are wanting to control and charge for our social media, perhaps?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting sort of future of the internet, this idea around decentralization. And I mean, those two examples that you've used, Telegram, as we know through the mainstream media, was used extensively and I believe still is as part of the Russia-Ukraine war that's happening there. So that's potentially the dark side that you're referring to, as well as other things that happen in those spaces. Now, they exist because they offer anonymity, end-to-end encryption, and like you say, having the ability to communicate with people without,
they're not going to get demonetized or shut down or censored.
Things
in that
like
regard.
that. And Mastodon is an example of a social media platform that uses that same idea of decentralization, where you can stand up a community, join different servers, and not one entity owns Mastodon, the platform. It's diversified and distributed across all its users.
I know there's going to be a bunch of people listening to this at the moment that are struggling to catch up, and they're going, gosh, do we need all of these? Where do we find our space? Where do we find our community? Where do we find a range of social media communication platforms that work for us and people that we want to communicate with?
Well, that's the hard one. If you want to communicate with the people that you know in your life, which is your friends, your family, your aunts, your uncles, you are generally going to be limited to the main platforms, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, your even potentially TikToks these days, where your children at least are hanging out. So you're drawn to those to stay connected to them. However, the opportunity arises when you consider communities that you are a part of, but you don't necessarily know the people in real life. And so you can have presence on some of these platforms, like be a part of a Discord server where you're discoursing with people around an interest, whatever weird hobby you might have, where those communities exist. So the answer is all of the above.
And hey, something we were talking about a couple of weeks ago is breaking out of our echo chambers.
Yes.
Maybe this is something that we need to do. If for example, the only social media you do is Pinterest,
I love Pinterest.
Well, exactly. And for some people, that's their jam. But if that's the only thing you're doing in terms of social media, perhaps finding new ways, new spaces, new ways of communicating, opening yourself up to different voices, different perspectives on life, that could be a bit of a game changer.
Yeah, it could be. And you can do that within those own platforms to help inform the algorithm that's feeding you the content you're currently seeing by going into the search bar, pursuing some of the topics that you're being fed. Have a look at the antithesis of it. YouTube's a great example.
Yep.
Second largest search engine in the world. But the algorithm absolutely informs a lot of your perception on the world based on what you're seeing, which you fed it originally. So just go in there.
Made me who I am today. No,
sure.
Just joking.
Go and search the opposite though, and see what you're given on all of these platforms.
Hey, I always appreciate your wisdom and insight in this area, Justin. Thanks for your time today.
Anytime.
Thanks for joining us on Rhema. Now, if you found value in today's content, hit that like button. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel with the subscribe button. This really helps us to continue to produce more quality content for you. And hey, if you'd like to stay updated and never miss any of our future videos, ring that notification bell as well. Don't forget to follow us on our other socials, which are in the description below. And until then, stay tuned.